JD Vance exposed European leaders like never before. Take a look.
The bureaucratic leadership in Brussels, right? People who aren't elected, who are not responsive to the democratic will, and I think have made the European continent less secure, less free, and less prosperous.
In a recent speech, JD laid out key reasons behind Europe's stagnation, taking shots at Starmer in the process. Something that clearly didn't sit well with the Prime Minister, despite what he's claimed before.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time.
And today, we're telling you all about it. So if you believe truth isn't partisan, hit the subscribe button and let's jump right into it.
And what do you think about Europe? Europe has several problems if we look on the growth numbers of the European Union, on the competitiveness, on the energy prices. How do you see Europe, and what could be the future for Europe under these circumstances?
Yes, it's very sad because there's so much. I talked about this in my speech last night a little bit. There's so much discussion in the European press. Do Vance and Trump and Rubio, do they hate Europe? Do they love Europe? The answer is we absolutely love Europe. It's an important trading partner, but most importantly, again, like I said, it's an important cultural cousin of the United States of America. The ideas that founded the United States of America were first birthed on the European continent. We're very mindful of that fact. And of course, we love the people, the culture, the everything about this place. But we do have some disagreements with the political leadership.
Now, to put into perspective just how bad the political leadership in Europe really is, it's important to look at some simple facts. For instance, in recent years, the European Union has been labeled as, quote, regulatory superpower. And there's a reason for that. You see, while companies like OpenAI and Anthropic were pushing technological boundaries, the focus across the Atlantic has been on things like requiring plastic caps to stay attached to bottles. It's almost like California, but on steroids. Over time, these types of rules pile up, and businesses start looking elsewhere to invest. And that's the bigger issue. This is a continent with massive potential, one that could easily compete with the world's leading economies if the energy were fully unlocked. JD went on to give a couple of examples to prove his point, and needless to say, he didn't hold back.
Why have the Europeans, while saying, by the way, that Russia is the biggest national security threat, why have the Europeans made themselves completely dependent on unreliable sources of energy? Like, if you think that Russia, an energy superpower, is the biggest threat, you should do everything in your power to make yourselves economically and energy dominant, like President Trump has done in the United States. Our European friends have done the exact opposite. If you look at the cost of electricity in the United Kingdom, which is way underinvested in their energy resources, UK families are paying 4 times, 5 times, 6 times what United States citizens are paying for electricity. Now, obviously, I care most about America's citizens. That's who I'm elected to represent. But isn't it a scandal that middle-class Brits, that people who are working hard and playing by the rules can't afford to heat their home, can't afford to transport themselves to work because their leadership has made energy so expensive?
Now, there's an interesting survey that came out recently that absolutely proves JD's point. According to the Institute of Economic Affairs, where Brits were asked where the UK would rank compared to US states, they believed it would be the 7th wealthiest state. Well, guess what? In reality, they rank absolute last. And when respondents were shown the actual numbers, their reaction was shock. It's not hard to see why. See, for years, their governments reassured them everything was on the right track, while the country was clearly heading in the opposite direction. And when people dared criticize the politicians in charge, they'd be thrown in jail for it, which is the exact point JD expanded on next. But before we play that, we have a quick message from today's sponsor. In our last spotlight, we covered Saga Metals, trading as SAGMF in the US and Saga in Canada, and their move to secure another titanium asset in the same district as the world's largest titanium mine. Now the story is accelerating. You see, Saga has expanded further with the Wolverine project in Labrador, and the timing really matters here. The global push for energy and defense is hitting a major roadblock. Heavy rare earth supply remains tightly controlled, with much of it coming from either unstable or adversarial regions. That's why this goes beyond typical mining story. it ties directly into national security. The Trump administration has made it clear that securing domestic supply chains for defense is a priority. These materials are essential for jet engines, satellites, and precision systems, and the Wolverine project hosts the exact elements needed to support that demand. Saga is now advancing towards a maiden resource of 100 million tons, with a long-term target that could exceed 1 billion. Now that level of scale puts Wolverine in a different league. Now here's what makes this really stand out. The project sits near Voisey Bay, a landmark discovery valued at over $4.3 billion, showing how one discovery can transform a whole company. Saga is in that same region, backed by strong policy support, strong drill results, consistent execution, and a current valuation that doesn't yet reflect the scale of what they're building. So, if you want to learn more about their journey, check out the link in the description. Special thanks to Saga Metals for making today's video possible.
Isn't it a scandal that when normal people on the European continent try to talk about what's going on in their governments, they try to criticize their governments, they try to exercise their rights of free speech, those governments then go to American social media companies and say, you must censor the citizens of your own country because we don't want to hear them. We don't want to hear their free expression. We don't want to hear their free speech. There's just so much wrong with the political leadership. And I would particularly say the bureaucratic leadership in Brussels, right? People who aren't elected, who are not responsive to the democratic will, and I think have made the European continent less secure, less free, and less prosperous. And it's always funny, they always say, well, the United States it defies economic logic. You guys just have way higher economic growth. You have way lower energy costs. They say this as if it was something that happened through accident, rather than through the policy choices of the President of the United States. It is not magical that the United States has lower energy costs than the United Kingdom. It's because we've made smart decisions and their leadership is not. They could change course, and we hope that they will.
Now, the fact that a European audience applauded him shows they recognize the risks of unelected bureaucrats making decisions they won't be held accountable for. Even The Telegraph recently argued the US economy is set to grow at twice the rate of the EU. Think about that in contrast. In America, voters can replace leaders after bad decisions. Across much of Europe, though, the same unelected higher-ups stay in place, often pushing policies that slow growth and hurt everyday people. Now, when it comes to Starmer in particular, there's another layer. During his visit to the Oval Office last year, JD had already talked about free speech in the UK, but instead of addressing it directly, he chose to gaslight everyone in the room. Take a look.
Conference, Vice President Vance condemned free speech violations in the UK, particularly. Could you respond? What is your message?
I have an idea. We have the man right here. Come on. Let's go, JD. We're putting you on stage.
Great. Yeah, look, I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies, but we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history there.
That's Starmer for you. He keeps pushing policies that don't deliver. But the moment he's confronted about it, he either gaslights everyone in the room or shifts the blame elsewhere. Somehow, that approach has kept him in office for nearly 2 years. Meanwhile, everyday life for the average Brit continues to decline, with rising costs, lower growth, and fewer opportunities.